All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of America Soccer Quick Kicks. I am your host, David Wright, and tonight I'm very excited. We have a very special episode. I'm going to have a guest on for an interview. One of the things, when I contemplate the state of the sport in this country, one thing that I think about a lot, and I don't know the answer to it, is like, how do we develop professionals? What can we do to improve the youth system and the talent developments process that we have in this country? And I think when you especially start comparing it to like American football, you start, I think pretty easily the question can turn to, well, what's college soccer doing for us? What is NCAA soccer? Why can't it be a little bit more useful or effective in being a path for professionals? And there's actually an effort right now to try to revitalize, or I should say reshape and rethink how college soccer is organized. And I believe there's been an official request from US Soccer for the NCAA to try to make some of these changes. And what I want to do is get into what these proposed changes are, and if we think that they would be beneficial to the American player. And so I'm very excited that tonight I am going to bring on a special guest. His name is Donald Wine. He is the host and the producer of the excellent podcast called USASoccerCast, and I'm going to bring him on right now. And this is the first time we've ever met. Donald, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks a lot. I reached out to you the very last minute. I was actually going to sleep last night thinking, what am I going to do my live stream on tomorrow night? And I know that NCAA proposed changes were things I wanted to tackle, but I didn't really feel like I was knowledgeable enough on it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask that SoccerCast guy if he'd be willing to do it. I reached out to you this morning, and you were like, yeah, you were cool with it. So I really, really appreciate it. I want you to know I really love your podcast. I'm subscribed. I catch it every time it comes out. My show is called Quick Kicks because I wanted I wanted it to be short form content. I listen to several soccer podcasts. Most of them are usually an hour and a half long, something like that. And they're these real big dives. And sometimes I want that deep dive, but also other times I just want to like keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening. Give me the big stories. Let me know the state of things. And your show does that in an excellent way, in a much higher level. You're doing it bigger than I am, but that's kind of where I started with my channel. And before I started going live, they were generally about 10 minutes long. But now I'm live streaming, and I usually go like maybe 20 or 30, but that's okay. I just want you to know that I really appreciate you being on. Tell us a little bit about your show and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. It's great to meet you, and I'm glad that my show can in any small way inspire others to do something similar, to again keep these conversations going in a more thoughtful kind of way, which you're doing. We've been doing the USA Soccer Cast. It started out as the Stars and Stripes FC podcast back in 2018. And of course, with SB Nation, a lot of things moved around, and we rebranded as the USA Soccer Cast a couple of years ago. And I've been going strong ever since. It's been a great journey. It's as you know, a labor of love. Sometimes you have to kind of think of how to approach things. And for me, I always like to do things in a thoughtful way. It's just me on the show sometimes. So it's just me collecting my thoughts, and I want to make sure that it's not a scatterbrain type of approach to some of these topics that everyone's talking about. It's more of a nuanced approach of really getting down to the nitty-gritty in a truncated timetable of some of the biggest issues facing not just the national teams, but all of American soccer, and that includes the leagues as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you are about my only source of information on the women's team. So I definitely lean on you for that part of it. And what I want to talk about tonight, I think maybe is a little bit outside of what you usually talk about, but I want to talk about college soccer. Like, let's start with what it's like now, and maybe like some of the problems with it or some of the things that US Soccer wants to change about. Give us the state of things now, and then we can go into what US Soccer would like to see it become.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, but my other side of sports that I do, that I concentrate on, is college basketball, and college sports kind of comes up in that. And really, when you think about college soccer and just the construct that is college sports, it's in many ways very antiquated. And for some reason, men's soccer and even to more of an extent, women's soccer, it feels antiquated, the system and the format that it currently has right now. It's a very short season. There's a lot of games being put into a short timetable. I mean, even in the last couple of years, some teams have started to, branch into starting their season in August. But before, it was September to early November. They tried to play 20 games in that timetable, which of course in soccer is really hard to do. You had a lot of injuries. You had a lot of players who were just gassed. And it felt like from the coaching standpoint, they weren't able to really help develop some of these players. And a lot of the times when you think about MLS, the Super Draft, and at the time, the NWSL College Draft, those were in sometimes early January. So once the season was over, a lot of players were trying to figure out if they could go pro, if they could go to maybe a semi-pro team for the summer. A lot of things happening. And for the college coaches, they kind of said, okay, well, we won't see these players until probably next June. So I think there has always been a push to try and figure out how to change the format and structure of college soccer. But it's hard to do that when you think about the construct of college sports in general, with the conferences and how everything centers around really college football, but to a lesser extent, college basketball as well, and how soccer may fit in that. So it's a really interesting conversation. And I don't know if US Soccer was the first group that should have approached it, but I'm glad that they have at least gotten the conversation rolling.
So right now it's a short season just in the fall, or is that
Mm-hmm.
right?
Correct.
And so when that season's over, those players are not training. The coaches are not seeing them. Is that right?
That's correct. And the NCAA has rules on how many hours a week that they can be a part of the team and do organized team activities. That's not just training, but also, like, again, working out in the gym, going to games. All of that fits into this. At the time, it was a 20-hour quote unquote work week. And so, with games being 90 minutes, and, really with warmups and stuff like that, that is a lot of time that's eaten up with some of these games, which doesn't leave enough time for some of these teams to really train and get the development part things down.
All right. So what I want to do is kind of give a big picture. This channel is kind of dedicated toward the new fan that's not necessarily totally familiar with the sport. And it seems to me, the way I read it, and you can tell me if you see it a different way, but going to college to play soccer, that's a low percentage path to a professional career. At least when you're looking at Major League Soccer, it seems like if they're either bringing kids up through their academy system. We can talk a little bit about what that model looks like, or you're buying players that are already playing in other leagues. And the idea of just a kid getting a college scholarship to play soccer, graduating and getting drafted by the way it works in football, it happens some in Major League Soccer, but it seems to be a very, very small percentage of the chance. And my question is there something intrinsic about the sport of soccer that just makes that not really the right approach at all? Or is there something wrong with the way the college system is set up that can be improved so that path becomes a stronger one?
Well, I'll back up just a few years, because I think the importance of the MLS Super Draft has diminished in the last few years. And that has been due to the rise of the academy system within Major League Soccer, and also MLS Next Pro and the MLS Next system. That has come along recently, but before that, it was very heavily relied upon college athletes to kind of fill out some of these rosters. There were no, think back to, the designated player rule came about when David Beckham came into the league. That was 2007. So we're not even 20 years into the designated player era. The guys that you remember from before that, almost all of them got to Major League Soccer, especially Americans, got to Major League Soccer through the college system. On the women's side, it's even more pronounced. There's not a lot of women's academies. So the NWSL Super Draft, or the NWSL College Draft, going away last year was a big deal, because it meant that teams could go after players. But for the most part, on the women's side, there are teams, English, Europeans, African players, South American players, they all still come to the United States to go to college, because they know that it's still a major pathway into the NWSL. because the academy system is not as robust yet for some of these teams as it is on the men's side, and that's just due to recent investment. So I think the college pathway is still viable. Now, I think the best players have found out that they don't have to go to college to get into Major League Soccer or to go pro. I think that's where the call for a new format and a new system has really elevated in recent months. But I think that viable pathway is still there for a lot of these players.
Can you describe a little bit of what an academy, a typical academy, looks like, how it operates? What's the business model? Like, where are they finding the kids? Are the kids living there? Are they paying for this soccer training? And at what age do they? What percentage of them maybe are signing pro contracts? How many of them are actually earning college scholarships and just using soccer to find a different career path entirely? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I don't really have a great sense of it, but I'll say this: the academy system is one that, again, is still developing here, and every academy is slightly different than the others. And then you have the travel leagues, which are the travel academies that are not attached to a Major League Soccer team or a USL team. I'm not going to get into those because there's just too many of those. But I will say that identifying players at an early age is kind of what these academies are trained to do. Get them into the pathway where local players, for me, DC, the example would be DC United, trying to identify local talent in the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and saying, hey, let's get these guys into a pathway where one day they can play for DC United. That may start when they're 8. It may be when they're 12. It all depends on when this is discovered. And again, that's where your scouting system really comes into play. But there's also, there's kind of geographical territories that each of these teams have. And of course, there's going to be times where, you go to a tournament where there's hundreds of teams and hundreds of players, and, Philly Union, for example, and I'm not saying that's nefarious, but like Philly Union is right next to, the DC territory. So naturally they may say, oh, this kid from Maryland, let's figure out a way to, get them into our program. And so that's why there's rules attached to some of this stuff. But I will say that the academy system is where most MLS teams are hoping to develop the talent that they hope will eventually appear on their first team.
Yeah, so they've got scouts out there. They're identifying young talent and they're getting them into their program. And as far as the club's concerned, like if they see high prospects for this kid, are they kind of hoping they don't go to college, or are they? It seems. I mean, I would assume the way it works is that they're identifying all these kids, they're bringing them all in, and there's only going to be a certain percentage that actually rise to the top and get offered a pro contract. But I would think that it's also it may even be a stronger path toward a college scholarship than it is toward a professional club career, at least, as their next step.
Yeah, I think also, again, very recently you had it where players would be in the academy system and then they would go to college for a year. And then all of a sudden, again, using the local team, DC United, for example, they could go and send a player to a Wake Forest. Their player could go to Duke, where I went to school. And then, after their freshman year, they go, okay, kid, you're ready. We're going to sign you to a deal. And they leave college and they sign with that team because they're already in the academy system. It was some of the other players, a lot of the international players that come to play in college here, that ended up in the super draft. And I think there are also some of those players who just, for some reason or another, fell through the cracks. So they had that system as well. And even sometimes there are some teams or some players who go, I'm kind of sick of the academy system. I do want to go to college. I do want to get an education, but I also want to play while I'm there. So they eventually go. Sometimes teams kind of cut bait with them and they let them do their thing. Sometimes they keep tabs on them, but eventually, again, they have that opportunity to then get back into Major League Soccer or, USL, or go abroad to a club somewhere else. But I think it's again, the construct of the college system is where a lot of people who are on the soccer side may not recognize how it works on the college side. And a lot of people on the college side don't have this, again, they have their mind closed as to how the rest of the world works with regards to soccer and how we fit into that construct.
Okay, so I do want to get to what these proposed changes are that are on the table, of maybe some ideas of how to reorganize and come up with a new approach for college soccer. But I'll just say this, because the other thing that I'm very interested in talking about, and I think it's probably too big of a topic to do right now. Maybe I'll have you back on in the future if you have any kind of take on this. But so we're talking about the current system of academies discovering young talent in their area and bringing them in. But where are those scouts finding those kids? They're finding them, I assume, mostly in these pay-for-play soccer community soccer clubs or developmental camps or whatever. It's not, unfortunately for people like us that are big soccer fans, we don't have a big pickup culture, like playground pickup culture for soccer in this country. It's all highly organized. And unlike football, I mean, football, it's like if you're good, you're playing in high school and you go to college and you go to pro and you're getting all the coaching and the training and the development you need on that path. And it seems as though like that doesn't seem to really work. Like varsity high school and going to college is not really the most common path anymore now that the league has evolved to the point that it's in now. And I guess what I'm wondering is there a way for high school and college soccer to become strong enough that it can be just as valid, just as common as a path to a professional career as what we see in football? Or is culturally I guess what I'm wondering is culturally, will the coaching ever be what it needs to be in this country for anything like that to ever happen? Do you have any kind of quick take on that?
I will say quickly that, the pickup culture, for example, I think is robust in certain areas. New York City, here in DC, it's not always organized because we have neighborhoods where I can walk down the street and some people may be playing soccer. That could be the reality here. Now, I grew up in Michigan. There was no pickup culture because you got to drive everywhere, right? So to your point, you do have to organize a little bit more because I'm not driving 30 minutes to show up and there only be one guy to kick the ball around with. Here I can walk down the block and see if there's 10 guys, or I can kick the ball against the wall until other people show up. So I think it's maybe based on different areas. And I think the coaching aspect of things very quickly is one where people have to realize that we are a country of 350 million people. We are the size of Europe. Not everybody in Europe has it together, right? Like there's a reason why San Marino is the way they are. There's a reason why England is the way they are when it comes to soccer. And so if you think about it in those terms, I think people will maybe give this nation a little bit more grace and allowing for what we do best to develop. And that is a melting pot of a bunch of different ideas and trying to figure out, kind of like this, right? You may disagree with how U.S. Soccer approached it, but the fact is they're in a room talking about it, and we need to get the right people in those rooms. That's not just the bigwigs. That's also the coaches. That's also the administrators for the NCAA. That's also the fans, college fans who like college sports, soccer fans who like soccer. They need to be in a room together, because I think they'll find that while there are a lot of similarities, there are also some differences in how they approach from a mindset of how this could look. And I think, again, we don't have to mirror ourselves to any one system. We are the United States of America. We can create our own system because we are a unique country, just like Canada has their own, just like England has their own, different problems for different areas. But I think, being in a position where we can level-headedly approach it, kind of like you and I are doing, right? We come from different backgrounds, but we can talk about how this may work and where you may agree and where we may disagree. But at the end, that conversation needs to continue, because just putting out a white paper and saying this is what it should be, that shouldn't be the end of the conversation from U.S. Soccer, and it definitely shouldn't be for the NCAA.
Okay, so I want to start getting into what these proposed changes are, but what do you think the goal is from U.S. Soccer by doing this? What's their end game? What's their ideal outcome?
Well, if you read the white paper, the very first thing that they said is they wanted to be financially beneficial, and that's where I already disagree with the goal of this. Being financially beneficial to both the NCAA and to the colleges and to the conferences and to the leagues, but also to U.S. Soccer, as maybe some of these teams get enveloped more into the U.S. Soccer pyramid, right? Where with the League Twos and the USADAs and everything like that. I think that should be the last thing on the table, is because that's how we're in this position now. They want it to be financially beneficial because, to get this truncated season that they have, they say, oh, we need the fields for other things, or we need the resources for other sports. So let's not have soccer out here very long, because they're bleeding money out of the overall pie that we're getting mainly from college football and those deals. So I think that's the first step. Is I would have approached it to say, what makes it better for the game, for the development of these players, and to create multiple pathways to multiple leagues, not just here, but around the world. That's the real hit here. And I think players who go to college want to get that development. They also want to get an education. Finding out how to balance the student athlete part of things is important for the college part of things, but also for the soccer part. They want the development too. Just because they go to college doesn't mean they don't. They just want to play soccer for 4 years and get a degree and go on to Wall Street. They want to continue to have a pathway to maybe play somewhere. Doesn't have to be the glamorous road, but that's why they're on the road they are. They picked that because they know it is an upward battle, but they want to fight it.
Well, I'm disappointed to hear that. I would like for U.S. Soccer's perspective, I would like for their goal to be, how can we improve the American player? What can we do to improve the factory so that the product coming off the line is better than what we've had? Like their end game should be winning the World Cup. And if that means finding a way to maximize the effectiveness and impact of the college system to help create opportunities, you know what I mean? Just to create more good players, create more prospects, train professionals, more opportunity for there to be, to enlarge the player pool and giving a chance for the best to rise to the top. I don't know why that's not the way U.S. Soccer is looking at it, but let's go through it. What are some of these changes that they're asking for? Is the way I understand it, U.S. Soccer approached NCAA with a white paper and said, we think it should be like this. And as far as I know, they're like, the conversation is going to happen, but it hasn't really happened yet.
Well, they've had some conversations. I do believe that there were some NCAA administrators that were involved. How, again, to the extent, we're not entirely sure. I do know there are some NCAA coaches who were consulted about how the system is right now and what they would like to see changed. And I know there's some college coaches out there who have been very vocal over the years about how the NCAA college soccer system can be fixed. I think there was a lot of discussion about the differences between college men's soccer and college women's soccer, because there are a lot of stark differences. And the fact that Title IX is involved in that, how do you, the one thing about the men's side of things is, how do you save some of these programs? Because as colleges decide, oh, well, they're doing their thing over there, like, we don't want to put the money into it, because right now it is an arms race, and college football is the canon for everything. That's why we have the TV deals. That's why we have, the Stanford and the ACC. That is why we have UCLA and USC in the Big Ten. It's because they want the most money possible so they can spend the most money possible to bring in the best athletes, to have that cycle continue to revolve itself. And NIL is a big factor in how all this money gets spent. And a lot of them are saying, let's focus on spending our money for, good or bad. Let's spend our money on the people and the places and the things that are going to bring in the most money. And right now that is steered towards college football. College soccer, especially on the men's side, is one of the first sports that people consider cutting in effort to build a new gym for the football team, or build a new locker room, or add 10,000 seats to a stadium. So that is the thing that U.S. Soccer needed to figure out in that room. And that's why some of these NCAA administrators should have been in that room. Some of these college administrators should have been in that room. But I think from U.S. Soccer standpoint, you're right. Just because a player goes to Europe doesn't mean they're not a good American player, right? You have to figure out how to get those American players and keep them in the system so that pathways exist for them to go elsewhere, go within some of the mini leagues that we have here, and allow them to be as great as possible to help increase that player pool. Rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. So are they? What are they looking to do? Are they looking to add games? Are they looking to just spread the season out? Are they looking for I guess, permission for the coaching staff to spend more time with the players around the calendar, just so they're developing more months out of the year? I mean, what are some of the things they're looking to do?
I think the biggest thing, the biggest change that I think is welcome, and I think a lot of college coaches will tell you the same thing, is making it where it's a fall spring schedule. Same number of games, 20 to 22 games. You still have your playoffs, you still have your college cup, but spreading it over 7 months as opposed to 2. That way that most teams are playing one game a week, one game every 2 weeks. You have more opportunity for coaching. The coaches get to keep the players longer, right? Like, so instead of them being done with the team in December or November, they're now done with them in April or May, and they're able to keep them a longer time. I think also the way the schedule would work, because they have more weeks to play more games, they can start the season a little bit later in the fall. So starting at the end of September, early October, as opposed to early to mid-August before some schools even start. That way, you have guys who can go play in some of these pro leagues, the semi-pro leagues like USL League 2. You have a lot of those college, those summer leagues that allow for college players to play, and they're able to do that and play the full season and not have those seasons end in late June because they got to get back to campus. You also have, the other 300,000 athletes who, like us, go out and get jobs every summer. And they say, hey, I'm not going to play soccer this summer. I want to have an internship. I want to, go to summer school. And this allows for them to do that too. They can play a full season of soccer. They're going to be playing most of the year. And then they have a full summer to rest, recuperate, work, study, or go join one of these leagues.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that that U.S. soccer, the soccer people are coming at it with one set of priorities, but they're kind of not recognizing or not fully aware of, but there's the college part. And so the NCAA is having to account for that and look for that balance for student athletes, and understanding that not every college soccer player is necessarily looking to play professional soccer. They're just getting their degree, right? So I wonder, what do we know what some of the NCAA's, do they have any objections to some of these proposed changes, or is this really a conflict of philosophies, or both? Do you have any sense of whether both sides are really looking to work together to find the right solution?
I'm glad you asked that, because that is an easier answer than you think. The NCAA does not know what they're doing. I have said this for 20 years. It has not changed. They have never given me a reason to doubt that mantra. And unfortunately, like U.S. Soccer, again, they basically gave the NCAA a heads up, like, hey, we're doing this. You want to be involved? We may consult a couple people, but we're doing this white paper. We're going to present it to you, and then you can respond. To my knowledge, I don't know how the NCAA has responded, if they're going to respond, or how they're going to respond. But I will say that the NCAA is about making money too. They like making money in everything that they do. And kind of like U.S. Soccer, they want stuff to be financially beneficial to them as well. And so now you have these two organizations that love butting heads with other organizations, two rams in a field going right at each other very soon, because I think the NCAA is going to have their response, but they're not going to want to break up their traditional structure that they've already had, because they know that traditional structure is going to make them money. So I'm curious as to how they respond. I'm curious as to what they do to kind of counter or even answer some of the proposals in here. I think some of them are what college coaches are looking for. And if it were me, I would say, okay, tell me what you like. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 5. Great. Implement them. Now let's focus on 4 and 6 and 8 and these ones that we don't agree with, and figure out how to get a compromise going that helps everybody and helps the development of soccer in this country. But that's not how the NCAA operates. And so I'm curious to see what their response will be, and whether they will allow for a season to go all year. Because to this point, despite most college coaches saying this is what we want, the answer has always been no. And that has put a lot of these programs in peril. That's what they're also trying to do, is save some of these college programs have to save themselves. They're raising their own money. And with NIL, that makes it very difficult for them to succeed in a pool full of money. So I'm curious to see what the NCAA does.
Yeah, that's my main concern when I think through all of this is, all right, this all sounds great, U.S. soccer, but how viable is the sport at the college level, really? I mean, I'm in the South, and in the SEC, there is, as far as I know, there is no men's soccer program in the SEC. The women have programs, but the men don't. Now, I know college soccer is big on the West Coast, and at least traditionally has been big in what I still think of as the ACC, right? Virginia and Wake Forest, North Carolina. I and I know Indiana has always been a hotbed, so maybe it's just only the South where it's kind of slacking. But if the sport on the men's side is not actually national, and it's always the program that seems to be the first on the chopping block, I wonder if it's really viable enough to really warrant this kind of reorganization. You know what I mean? Because I know that like one part of what they want to do is they want to see all the teams organized in regional conferences and things like that. But I just feel like not every region even has the sport going on. So I don't know if I guess that's what I'm saying is it even viable enough to really be looking at it this hard?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it because, again, every hour, the era of NIL changes ever so slightly and makes everybody have to stop what they're doing and adjust. Even again, I was recording a Duke podcast earlier today, and since then things have changed to the point where we're kind of like, okay, how does this affect what we just said an hour ago? What could happen tonight that affects this conversation we're having? We never know because the NCAA has kind of thrown up, their hands and said, let it be the Wild West when it comes to NIL. But again, what's driving that is sports that put soccer in peril. I think the other thing is I look to the early days of college hockey. And, when I was growing up, University of Michigan was in a conference with Lake Superior State, Ferris State, those sort of schools. They're not in the Big Ten, but in hockey, they said, you know what, y'all are the, closest to us. So let's form a conference. They called it the CCHA. It was one of the greatest conferences ever because they said, we don't care where you're from. We don't care how big or small your school is. Do you play hockey? You do. You are in this area. You are great.
Right.
And so that's why you had some of these, classic traditional rivals. And for me, when I see, when I'm, go home and I see a Lake Superior State shirt, I know what that's about. I know they're about their hockey, right? So you have those little things. And I think soccer can be that in a way, but it's about how you organize it. I think the first thing is the biggest question will be some of these traditional powers, the traditional schools, even some of the ones you mentioned, the SEC schools that don't have them. The reason why, even if Georgia was to form one tomorrow on the men's side, they're going to be like, who do we play? Because we don't really care about playing Clemson. We don't really care about playing Florida State, Stanford. Like, even though they're, those are maybe in a conference, the conference structure is the one thing also kind of holding college soccer back, because when they talk about promotion relegation, which is one of their proposals to eventually do that, that is not something that conferences want to hear. They want to know, they want to have guaranteed games, and they also want to have guaranteed rivals. Duke and UNC don't want to play, split up and be in different divisions and play other teams. They want to play each other. So that is that's a construct that I think U.S. Soccer didn't really consider. But again, the NCAA has to, at some point become an adult. We've been waiting a long time for them to do that, but I think they have to, because their first job is going to be, how do we protect those integral pieces of our construct? So I think that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. I think people got to be more open to, again, playing some teams within the region, again, like a Lake Superior State, who may have a soccer program, but after that, the next closest is, 400 miles away. You want to be able to, make it regionalized so that you can kind of cut down on costs, but also get more games in, and that leaves more time for development.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there is the soccer culture where, where you've got people saying, "Oh yeah, if we had promotion relegation, everything would be saved." But there's also the collegiate sports culture, so
Mhm.
like if Auburn start like you were similar to what you're saying, if Auburn starts a soccer program, they don't want to play some random Division III school somewhere that happens to play soccer. That's not going to grow the sport. That's not going to attract the fans. It's not going to become a thing. It's not going to do anything to make it any bigger. You have to be playing Alabama or you have to be playing Georgia. And now those
Mhm.
programs have to have, I mean, those schools have to have programs, and there's no guarantee that's going to happen. So to succeed and to grow, you have to, I guess, understand and respect like that collegiate culture. It's not just about the soccer culture. So yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't really looking at it like that until this conversation, and I think you're exactly right because as far as I was concerned, it's like, well, academy kids are just like talented high school kids that get a college scholarship that's good for them, but it's probably not going to land them in MLS or Premier League or whatever. And it's like, what can be done with soccer in college to make it more beneficial to Major League Soccer? That's how I was looking at it. And I was like, okay, well, U.S. Soccer's come to the table with the answers. This is great. We're going to change college soccer, and this is going to be great. But you're bringing to light for me that there's a cultural conflict here between soccer culture and college culture, and it's not necessarily going to be an easy fit. So that's very interesting. That's going to make all this a lot more interesting for me to keep following. Donald, I appreciate you coming on. We're going to wrap this up pretty soon. I do have one question. I don't know if you would have this answer off the top of your head, but like, do you
Mhm.
have any opinions? What take youth soccer and including the academy system and college soccer together, and just from the picture of development in America, do you have any opinions of like what you think would work? What would be the best approach?
I think the one thing that I've always said is every region, again, when you compare the United States to Europe, it's similar sizes, right? Similar area of land. But in one sense, the United States is one country. And in Europe, you have 50 countries in the same space. They all do things differently. And I think I would encourage people to open their eyes and note that in the United States, yeah, we still do things differently from town to town, city to city, state to state, region to region. What the Midwest does is not what you do in the South. What we do here in DC is not what they do in the Rockies or in the Plains states or in the Pacific Northwest. And I think getting all of those perspectives at a table is how we start to break down some of these cultural barriers. Again, you need the Duke and UNC fan at the table with the Pacific Northwest Cascadia Cup fan to understand where there's similarities and where those are very different. Because U.S. Soccer kind of presented this paper and said, "Here's what we think you should do." They didn't give any grounds to implement it. They didn't say here's a timetable. They said if we were the NCAA, this is what we would do. Now the NCAA has to go, okay, well, U.S. Soccer, if we were U.S. Soccer, this is what we would do. And then get at a table and see where those principles are similar, start implementing those, and you can start to make some gradual change. But in the end, it's going to take a lot of people entering rooms, swallowing egos, and understanding the other side before we can get any ground. But I think for development, it's pretty clear for me that the building of the academy system on both the men's and women's side is integral to our future. That's how we create something self-sustaining. And our unique challenge is to implement college into that. And I think college is still there. College is starting to diminish a little bit. But if you look at Major League Soccer, there are so many, and you look at the NWSL especially, like most of the players in NWSL went to college somewhere. It's not like Major League Soccer where we're relying more and more on international players or players who are coming up through academies. Even some players who were in academies and are homegrown players went to a year of college, and that was their way of getting back into or getting the reps they needed to get to where they need to go. So I encourage people to view college as an option. It may not be the option, but it has worked for so many, and it won't stop unless we decide to discard it. in form of something else. But I also am a big believer of rivalries. I'm a big believer of community, and the established communities that these colleges already have are things that we should not mess with because we want to fit into a mold that isn't ours.
I got you. So let me ask you this, and you have my full sympathy here. So, like, how long have you been a DC United fan?
I moved here in 2007. I had always
Okay.
followed the team. And when I moved here in 2007, my friend took me to my first game, and I was hooked from there.
Okay, good.
I write on the team now. I'm a beat writer for the District Press, and
Okay.
I gave up my season tickets. I'm a season ticket holder for the Washington Spirit, which great decision right now. They're doing wonderful, and looking forward to the playoffs here. But yeah, it's trying times here, and the magic and the aura that was the tradition of DC United needs to be rebuilt drastically. There's a lot of things they got to do. I will mention the friends at 615 Soccer. They've done a MLS survey that involves 22 different teams. Of course, we participated in that. So if you're a fan of MLS, go to their website. They have a link. It's a exhaustive survey, but it's about, again, getting these ideas here. Like, where the problems exist? What do you think of MLS season pass? What do you think of the academy system and the homegrowns and the TAMs and the GAMs and all the other garbage bucks that exist? How does that help, again, grow the game in this country? And as we look forward to next summer in the World Cup, how do we build something that is sustainable and can at least take advantage of the legacy that's going to be created by next summer? Not the ticket prices. Don't do that, but everything else around it, because that we need to be in a position to set this up for the next 100 years, just like every other country has done. We're always going to be behind in that regard, but we're the United States, and we have, again, a unique perspective for soccer, and we should tap into that, cultivate it, grow it, and hopefully one year we're celebrating as, these are the women's stars. Hopefully we get some for the men as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was a 96er for the MLS. I was on board for the first season, even though there was no team anywhere near me, living down in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember Marco Echeverri and John Harkes and Amy Moreno and that whole Bruce Arena team. So, and I feel like, because I have that memory of that first era of DC, I feel like the league is better when the Galaxy and DC are up, and DC has not been up in a long time. I know they had a pretty good year in 2018. And I was really rooting for them that year, and Audi Field is definitely a place that I've got on my bucket list. I want to be able to catch a game there. But I started off. I mean, I still am. My first loyalty is to Atlanta. I grew up in a fan of all Atlanta sports, and I was still in Georgia and when they entered the league, and I was at their first match. I moved to Tennessee in 2019, and so in 2020, Nashville joined the league, and I also went to their inaugural match. So I am an Atlanta and Nashville fan, but Atlanta first. So I commiserate with you. DC and Atlanta were competing for the wooden spoon.
We could have given you the spoon. Yeah, you could have taken it from us, and you decided apparently graciously to let us have it. I don't know. We might have to have a talk about that offline.
Whoever lost that match was going to have the wooden spoon. So and we played to a draw. We were I think the two bottom teams in the entire league.
Hard for the course this year. So.
Well, hopefully it changes for Atlanta soon. I know we have MLS playoffs going on. Like right now, the game may already be over. I'm going to watch it on delay here on Apple TV. Donald, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective on this. You put new light on this topic for me, and it's going to make me look at it in a different way. And I look forward to all of your SoccerCast episodes.
I appreciate that, Ed. This was a lot of fun. We'll do it again soon for sure. There's a lot to talk about.
All right, man. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you later.